right, welcome. I am here with Dr. Matt Clay again, and we're going to take you through something really, really unique. If you have never seen dry needling done, you're in for a treat because you are going to see it done on me today. I am working through a little bit of a flare-up with some elbow tendonitis, and Matt has been working with me with dry needling and doing some exercises for that. And we're just going to kind of talk about the whole thing, like what dry needling is, why it's a good thing, and how it all works. Okay, so why don't you start off by telling us what is dry needling?
So dry needling is a technique where they use the same needles that an acupuncturist would use, but as chiropractors, physical therapists, we're treating really musculoskeletal dysfunction. So whether that's trigger points, scar tissue, adhesions that can build up in the muscle from repetitive sprain strain, overuse injuries, that's what we typically use the modality for, and it gets really good results.
So what does it actually do?
So what it does, since you're using a very thin filament needle, you're creating localized damage within the muscle. And by doing so, it creates a small level of inflammation so that the body can start the healing process. Now, some inflammation is good, too much inflammation isn't so good. So with a technique like that, we can localize the area of soft tissue damage, and then the body goes in, does what it does naturally, starts to lay down more collagen, more connective tissue, and inevitably starts to strengthen the area back up again.
And I just want to say, I've noticed from the amount of dry needling that you've done with me, whether it was my shoulder or my hip or elbow or whatever, that I feel like with that in combination of some exercises that you've given me to do,
Right.
that has sped up the process just a little bit. It seems like I'm making more progress faster than doing nothing at all.
Right, yeah. I always like to combine the two just because, as you were saying, it's one way to help speed up the healing process, and then two, the needling will help minimize the amount of tension or maybe guarding or compensation that a person might have. And with the exercises, what you're trying to do is implement a more symmetrical muscle function instead of the dysfunctional one that's happened and potentially has caused like the injury or pain that the person might have.
Yeah, 1-2 combo, it's great.
Yeah.
So before we get started, I just want to say too, I know people have a lot of fear of needles.
Yeah.
And when you think about having needles put in you, it can make you very nervous, but I will say this does not hurt at all. You don't really even feel the needle like you would a shot or something like that.
Right. I mean, the gauge that we can use can be pretty thin. I typically use somewhere between a 38 to a 40. So if you don't know what that means, it's usually the higher the number, the thinner, the lower the number, the thicker the needle will be. Mm-hmm. So I like to use a thinner one. Literature states that regardless of the diameter, the effect's still the same. So I try to go for patient tolerance, even though that needles aren't everyone's favorite. It's still tolerable than a thicker gauge that some people might use or have used in the past.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, let's go.
All right.
Let's get this going.
Come on down. So we're working on Susan's elbow. She's had some elbow issues in the past. And she's a really good patient because she stays on top of her care, her health, and she never lets it get too out of whack. So what we're doing here today is just maintenance. Usually some people call this golfer's elbow, tennis elbow. Mm-hmm. It's really just elbow tendonitis. So the muscles that we're working on for her are the forearm flexors, and they're all going to come and attach into the outside of the elbow here. So what we're going to work on today are some of the areas that we feel are particularly taut or tight, and you can feel the bands as you palpate around in through her forearm. We're going to stay away from the bruise just because we don't want to impede on the healing effects that are happening there, because the bruise is a sign of healing. So we're not going to mess with that.
And let's talk about this bruise for a second, because I put on my story the other day that I had 3 bruises on me, didn't know where this one came from, and then later it dawned on me this was where we were working on the elbow.
Correct.
So can you explain really quickly why that might have bruised up?
So we can get bruising from doing treatments like dry needling, doing manual therapy treatments, using tool-assisted treatments as well. The bruising is just a sign of potential areas of scar tissue accumulation, adhesions that have built up in the area. And by doing needling or other modalities, breaking those down can cause a bruise, which again is just a sign of the healing response and the sign that the healing is already taking place. So we leave that area alone to let it do its job, and we're just going to move on to a different area that still needs some work.
Awesome. So it's not about me being old and bashing myself and not remembering.
It is not.
Good.
No.
That's good.
So we'll palpate around, and then she usually always has some good tension in these forearm flexors here.
And so just so you know, what he just did, I didn't feel any of that. I mean, it's not like
Yep.
you feel this like a you just really don't feel it at all.
And then some spots you'll see, if anyone's had this done, you might get like a twitch, or you might have had a different technique done where they go and they fish the needle around looking for a twitch response. What that is a trigger point that the therapist has hit. It's a normal response. But what we're gonna do with Susan today is add some stimulation to elicit that response. And by using the stim, all we're trying to do is increase the circulation to the area. We're trying to increase healing time and minimize the pain or irritation she may be experiencing in the area. So with this device, all we're doing is just using the metal probe here as a ground, and then going to each individual needle with the pointer, and that's going to cause the muscle to jump. So we'll start here and then work on that muscle, and you can see it's causing a twitch. Or I could just ground it to her skin, and again go to each individual muscle instead of grounding it to one of the needles.
So you can see that one is a bit more
You'll see
prominent.
some will have a tendency to jump a little bit more than others.
I remember once when you did my hip, and I had literally my leg flew up in the air. That was it. That was pretty crazy. This does not hurt either, by the way. It's at first it's a little weird because you don't have any control over this. It just happens.
Correct.
But it does not hurt.
Yeah, we use a low frequency. It doesn't have to be high, as long as you can sense it. It's going to create some kind of change. So it doesn't have to be that all or none mentality that you might have with using like stim pads, if you've ever had those placed on yourself before. Sometimes with higher frequencies, it will be a little bit more beneficial with things like that. With this, since we're directly stimulating the muscle, it doesn't have to be as high and is a lot more tolerable.
So is there any significance to the amount of twitching that happens?
You know, not really. The twitching, what we're trying to do again is work on minimizing the level of pain or discomfort the individual might have. And again, by doing these kinds of techniques with these kinds of modalities, we're trying to increase circulation to the area to promote the healing effects. You know, depending on what the soft tissue pathology is, if we leave them in longer, there's definitely evidence suggesting that that is beneficial. But if we're working more for like maintenance, things like that, we don't have to necessarily time the stimulation part of the treatment out.
And there you have it.
There you go.
Yeah, it feels great, not sore. And I would like to add too, I think that this is not just a one and done kind of thing. The benefits come from a couple of times through this treatment, not just one. I mean, once does provide relief, at least it has for me.
Yeah.
But probably over a bigger picture, maybe some regularity to it.
Right. Again, it depends. Like everybody's going to have a different experience with the treatment, and depending on what kind of injury you have, if it's just like delayed onset muscular soreness, if it's a strain sprain where there's different grades, there's grades 1, 2, and 3. We have different protocols, different recommendations for the patient based on what we feel is causing the symptoms that they have. So after like an evaluation where we do some specific testing, and we can say, you know, you're dealing with a grade 2 strain. It can take anywhere between this time to this time, and these are the amount of sessions that we would recommend.
Great. Well, there you have it. That's dry needling. I highly I swear by it. As a lot of you know, I swear by that. If you have any questions, plop them down in the comments, because Matt and I will be in the comments and we can answer whatever questions you have. And if you have any requests that you would like to see Matt and I do for a future video, put them down here too, and we'll be happy to get to them. So thank you for tuning in, and go have some fun with some dry needling.